urgent call to lift the deployment ban to Kuwait, Representative Ron Salo's plea. On March 11, 2024, Representative Ron P. Salo, from the Kabayan Partylist and chairperson of the Committee on Overseas Workers Affairs, made an impassioned plea for the reevaluation and lifting of the deployment ban to Kuwait. Grave concerns over prolonged ban. In his address to the House of Representatives, Representative Salo highlighted the serious concerns regarding the ban, which has been in place since February 2023. Kuwait responded by suspending new visas for Filipinos since May 2023, complicating matters for Filipino workers in Kuwait and those seeking employment there. The Department of Migrant Workers, DMW, justified the ban following the tragic 2023 case of Jolby Ranera, aiming to protect newly hired household workers from potential abuse. This is the third ban in 5 years due to heinous crimes against Filipino workers, following the 2018 and 2020 bans after the cases of Joanna Damafilis and Jean-Lynn Villavend, respectively. Advocacy and strategy. Representative Salo praised Kuwait's swift legal actions in recent cases involving Filipino workers. He pointed out that in the cases of Damafilis, Villavend, and Ranera, justice was served within a reasonable timeframe. The 2018 bilateral agreement established processes for handling such incidents. However, Salo questioned the necessity of prolonging the ban and called for clarity on the DMW's strategy, noting the lack of concrete progress despite President Ferdinand Marcos's announcement in October 2023 about lifting the ban. Salo emphasized the misconception that Filipinos are irreplaceable in the global workforce, stressing the competence and readiness of workers from other nationalities. He advocated for a re-evaluation of the country's strategy and more proactive measures to prepare Filipino migrant workers before they leave the Philippines. Recent developments. On May 21, 2024, Representative Salo met with officials from the Department of Foreign Affairs, DFA, to discuss recommendations from the recent congressional mission to Libya and the status of the deployment ban to Kuwait. The Kabayan Partylist remains committed to advocating for the welfare of overseas Filipino workers, OFWs, ensuring their rights and welfare are prioritized in government programs.
But the bitter truth is a lot of other nationalities are equally competent, prepared, and willing to grab the opportunities available to Filipinos. Certainly, much as we would want to believe, we are not irreplaceable. Over the years, a pattern has emerged where the Philippines resorts to deployment bans in response to tragic cases. Following the death of OFW Joanna Damafilis in 2018, a deployment ban was enforced in February 2018 and was rescinded 3 months later on May 2018 following the signing of the 2018 bilateral agreement on employment of domestic workers, which outlined several crucial provisions aimed at safeguarding the rights and well-being of Filipino workers in Kuwait. Consequently, justice was served as Damafilis employers were sentenced to death in Kuwait. Similarly, after the tragic loss of OFW Jean-Lynn Villavend late in 2019, a total deployment ban was put into effect in January 2020 and was later lifted only after a month in February 2020. Justice was also served as Villavendi's Kuwaiti female employer was sentenced to death, while her husband received a 4-year imprisonment term for failing to report the crime. As previously mentioned, the current deployment ban was imposed in the aftermath of the 2023 case of Jolby Ranera, which resulted to the conviction of the 17-year-old murderer to 15 years of imprisonment. The deployment ban was imposed in February 2023 and has been ongoing for 13 months and counting. In the past, our country has also resorted to imposing deployment bans. In the 1980s, the Aquino administration enforced a deployment ban due to rampant abuse and exploitation of household workers. In 1995, under the Ramos administration, a ban was imposed following the case of Flor Contemplacion, an OFW in Singapore who was unjustly sentenced to death. However, this action strained relations between the Philippines and Singapore. In 2017, the country banned deployment to Qatar due to political unrest in the region, but it was partially lifted the day after for Filipinos with Overseas Employment Contract, or OEC, and part of the Balik Manggagawa program. In November 2021, our country banned deployment to Saudi Arabia due to unpaid wages for former OFWs in Saudi, as well as abuse allegations, but which was lifted a year later in November 2022. Mr. Speaker, I stand before this august chamber not to lessen our call for justice for Julie Biranara and other OFW victims, but the quest for justice should be carefully balanced with other values we wish to achieve, employment opportunities among others for our people. The efforts to achieve these essential values should not be approached as either or, but simultaneously pursued. I have always called for the harshest and most stringent penalties against those who perpetrate injustice against Filipino migrant workers. For this sends a clear message that crimes against our kababayans abroad will not go unpunished. The tragic death of an OFW at the hands of our employer's son is condemnable, and rightly so. The whole nation was outraged. But the quest for justice for death, which we already secured in 9 months, should not imperil our diplomatic relations and the welfare of 272,000 Filipinos working in Kuwait, and should not deny countless of our kababayans the employment opportunities awaiting for them in that country. In the cases of the demise of OFWs Dimofilis, Villavendi, and Ranara, the perpetrators were brought to justice in 2 months, 1 year and 9 months respectively. A very swift delivery of justice to the victims, compared with the very long time Philippine courts decide cases. We're also left wondering whether the DMW is prolonging the ban just to make a statement. If so, a statement of what? What message do they wish to bring to the Kuwaiti government? What message do they wish to convey to our fellow Filipinos, to the 270,000 Filipinos in Kuwait wanting to go home and still continue their employment, and to the countless others who wish to try their luck in Kuwait? That we don't value these available employment opportunities abroad? That it is acceptable to give away these opportunities to other nationalities?